turn on the music machine. Let's go. Hello everyone, it is I, the Afro Avenger, here with another album review. I'm sitting here today because my usual spot back there, the sun is way too bright that you can't even see my face. So anyways, the album that we're going to be looking at today is Turn On the Music Machine by The Music Machine, so it's a self-titled album. It was released December 31st of 1966. I don't have any chart information. It was released on the label Original Sound, and its singles were Talk Talk and The People in Me. So without further ado, let's get this started. So here we have the first official review in my specifically obscure album reviews, where I talk about albums and artists that a lot of people have probably never heard of. I sort of kind of did this when I reviewed the Yellow Balloons self-titled album last year, and I just really like checking out albums by artists I've never heard of. This is one of those albums. The Music Machine is an American rock band that was actually one of the originators, more or less, of punk rock, so we can put them under proto-punk. A lot of the music on this album shows what would later become punk by bands like the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, Patti Smith, Iggy Pop and the Stooges, and the Clash, namely. That doesn't mean that this band is any less heavier than they are, because they're actually quite heavy and gritty. It just means that this was kind of before punk even existed, hence the term proto-punk. But they're also considered a garage rock band, and of course, that's been around way before punk was even conceived. About half of the tracks on here are actually cover songs, such as Cherry Cherry by Neil Diamond, CC Rider by Ma Rainey, and best of all, Taxman by the Beatles. All the other songs are written by lead vocalist and rhythm guitarist Sean Bonniwell. Many of the tracks deal with longing to do things but not being able to, such as the track Talk Talk, which is now a punk standard, and Some Other Drum. And considering that they covered songs like Taxman, which is about high taxes, and a song by the legendary Queen of Blues, Ma Rainey, it's safe to say that this entire album is just negative feelings all around, minus Cherry Cherry, which is more than likely about wanting to have sex. Even on the track Wrong, Sean is exclaiming that everything is going wrong. So while the music is pretty great, the happy feelings are nearly non-existent, which is usually expected on a punk rock record. Punk is not a very happy genre at all. Again, the music is pretty great, and the album isn't long at all, clocking in at just about half an hour with only 12 tracks. The production is admittedly not that great. To the album's credit, though, this album was quickly thrown together because of the band's popularity, so I suppose it wasn't meant to sound amazing aesthetically, and it's actually rather clean for an early punk rock record in 1966, which is, of course, the same year albums as legendary as Rubber Soul, Aftermath, A Quick One, and Pet Sounds came out. I really like the instrumentation on this album, such as the jazz soul-inspired guitar and drums on the track Come On In, and the incredible use of the electric organ on many of the tracks, which mainly starts by the second track, Trouble. Not to mention the soulfulness of tracks like Hey Joe by Billy Roberts, which of course would be famously covered by Jimi Hendrix Experience, only the following year to become the band's first big hit. The band also incorporates a lot of nice harmonies inspired by the vocal groups of the time. Cherry Cherry is perhaps the only track on here that really has no punk flair to it besides the repeating distorted guitar line. It's very calm and relaxed compared to the original, which is much faster and more exciting, partially due to the hand clapping, so this is one track where I definitely prefer the original over the cover. Not a bad track at all, but it's just one cover that doesn't exactly live up to the original. You'd especially think a proto-punk band would take the tempo a bit faster than the original, but instead gave it a much calmer, steady tempo, which effectively makes it lose its original drive. Even though half of the album is cover songs, only several of them are actually as good as, or even close to, the original. Of course, you should never expect a cover to be as good as the original, but while Ma Rainey's CC Rider is a slow, 12-bar blues song recorded in 1924, the version of CC Rider on this album doesn't particularly retain the same feel or emotion of the original, as it was taken up in tempo by a lot, and becoming much less of a blues song and more of a blues rock kind of song. The organ on this track and the repeating riff is really tight, and to some it would be considered better than the original, but for me that's neither here nor there. I like both versions quite a bit, and I can't really say one is better than the other when neither sound alike even the slightest. As for the major cover Taxman, I must say that I liked it a lot on the first listen, but after more listens you begin to realize how primitive it sounds compared to the original. It's not really any heavier, however, Some of the defining instruments on the original Taxman was Paul's repeating bass line, as well as George's guitar solo. On this version, both are almost completely covered up. Those two things specifically are what made the original so funky and enjoyable, and being that they're covered up with pretty much every other instrument, mainly the pounding drums and even the vocals themselves, it makes for a less than stellar cover. That's not really their fault, as I already said, but covering a song with such distinct instrumentation and then not utilizing that distinct instrumentation is almost always going to lead to a penalty. That's kind of a recurring issue throughout the album, actually. Very few tracks have any distinct instrumentation. I can imagine that that's not really what they were going for here, but in 1966, when a good handful of bands were experimenting with instruments, sounds, and studio techniques, this band sticks out like a sore thumb with this very lo-fi, primitive sound. Now, that could either be a good thing for some, and a negative for others, but again, that's neither here nor there with me. I quite enjoyed the rawness and earthiness of this album. Overall, this was a very solid record. It was the Music Machine's first album, and granted, some of the tracks are a bit lackluster and didn't really add much during that particular era when psychedelic rock and art rock were beginning to come to the forefront, and garage rock like this wouldn't gain a whole lot of momentum again until the mid to late 70s with bands like the Sex Pistols. This album was actually pretty well done. It was thrown together quickly, which again explains why many of the tracks just have a sense of linear musicality and instrumentation, perhaps besides the prominent organ, and why it's so raw and lo-fi in sound and quality. To some, that could be the kind of classic rock they're looking for or have always listened to, and to others, this could remain an obscure piece of work, never to be heard again, which is exactly why I'm reviewing it. Simply put, the main issue was instrumentation and variance when it comes to the instrumentation. It all feels like every instrument besides the drums and the organ are put on the same level on many of the tracks. Otherwise, it's a quite nice record, and I recommend to anyone who's into garage rock, punk rock, proto-punk, blues rock, and just heavy rock in general. That does it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe if you want to see more. And if there's a song or an album that you want to see reviewed that you like or may recommend, just leave a comment down below or hit me up on my Facebook or my Twitter. The links are in the description. But anyways, I will see you all in the next video. So long.